my attitude towards the death penalty is that I think a civilized society should have the death penalty, but it's reserved for extreme cases, particularly like particularly heinous cases, and then especially cases where there can be no doubt as to the guilt of the condemned. Because I certainly don't want to execute people who may be innocent and may not actually be guilty. So, I definitely think we should have the death penalty as an option. I think it should be rarely used. But there are also, a lot of cases where I do not think I don't think it's ethically justified. I don't think it's moral to just put someone in prison for life. I think that is taking the easy way out, and I think that is ultimately showing too much of a regard for the perpetrator of a horrific crime, and therefore not enough respect to the victims, to this person's victims. I think you need I think like the one that I find the one that just is like always on the tip of my brain when it comes to this kind of thing is the Colorado man who murdered his family, Chris Watts, and that was from I think it was like, was it 2015, 2016? Around that time, it was like right around the time I moved to Denver, and as that's just such a horrific case, and the man who committed this crime is just so obviously, he's obviously pure evil. There's just, I like, if you don't know, the specifics of what I'm talking about, if you don't know who this guy is, like, go, if you want to go read into it, I think you'll probably agree that he is just he just is like he's pretty much as close to pure evil as a person can get, because he very obviously lacks a soul. He very obviously lacks just any sense of decency. He murdered his children and his wife, and he can't claim insanity. He could claim like psychopathy or something. He could claim that he is defective in a way, emotionally or psychologically, certainly morally, but he can't claim psychosis, at least in the conventional sense. Like, he can't claim, he basically has no defense. He just did something unspeakably evil, and and that's it. But what happened? The cowardly, despicable, and I have no problem saying this, cowardly, despicable, I believe they were the parents of this man, Chris Watts, his wife, who he murdered, and they were the grandparents of the children that he murdered. And what did they do? They said they forgive him, and they said they forgave him, and they said that they didn't want him to be executed, because they're good Christians, and they, no offense to Christians out there, like, but this is a problem with being excessively forgiving, and being because they didn't want him executed because it went against their notion, their religious notion of no one should be executed, right? All life is precious, and that kind of thing, which I understand if that's your position. That choice, I don't think, should be left to. And I guess it's difficult, because I kind of like the Islamic thing where you can, where it's like the family can forgive or not, so they can like choose whether to execute. I don't know. I guess it's a difficult thing. Overall, I think my attitude would be it should just be up to the state whether to execute someone or not. Oh, okay, maybe, how about this? How about the family of a victim can demand execution, but they cannot stop someone from being executed. Does that make sense? Like maybe, maybe the family has the option to demand execution. I don't know. This is I'd have to work all this out. I mean, it's it's a complicated issue. But bottom line is these Chris Watts, mother or father-in-law, they basically begged the judge not to execute him, even though he very much deserved it. And they, because they valued their feeling good and feeling like good Christians, they valued that more than the lives of the family that he murdered. They valued that more than justice. They valued, like a performative display of, forgiveness and blah, blah, all that nonsense. They valued that over the lives of the innocent, over the lives of their own blood. And that's not okay. That's terrible. They're despicable. I have no problem saying that. Anyway, so my point is that I believe in the death penalty fundamentally, right? I think we should rarely use it, only for extreme cases where people did something really despicable and their guilt is 97% proven. Like like there's just basically we know this person did it, to try to prevent any miscarriage of justice. But oh yeah, so this thing with executing sex offenders, people who committed sex offenses against children under the age of 12. That sounds really good, doesn't it? It sounds like something, it sounds reasonable, and maybe it is. I'm not saying it's a good idea or a bad idea. It's tempting. The problem is, and this is the reason I'm not sure about it, and this is the argument that I heard, which I think, which makes a lot of sense. People have, who have argued against like using the death penalty in this manner. Their argument, which I think is a very good one, it's a very sensible one, is what if that makes things worse for the victims of these crimes? Because then you basically give the perpetrator nothing left to lose. They have nothing left to lose by murdering their victim. Like they commit the crime, like the original, sex crime, right? And then they might not, like usually they don't try to kill their victim, but what if, knowing that they face the death penalty just for the sex crime, what if that motivates them to take the lives of their victims? Because at that point, they don't want to be caught for the original crime. And if they're facing the death penalty anyway, what if that just puts them, kind of gives, it creates a perverse incentive to try to silence the victim permanently, just so they don't end up, so to try to minimize the chances of being caught and being charged and being put to death. And I don't know. I mean, it's, that's I think that's a very good argument. Like that, that's a very good, that's a legitimate concern. I don't know. Because I don't know whether, I don't think we can know for sure what would happen unless we started doing this. And I guess there are, I should look into that. There are definitely other countries where they execute people for this. So I don't know. Maybe it would work. I guess I should look into that. But here in the United States, I don't know. I don't know whether it would be overall, whether it would help or hurt more. Because sure, I want to execute people for this, right? Just on my sense of justice says, yes, that's a good, sure, let's do it. You should execute people for committing horrific crimes like that against children, But then on the other hand, there's also the kind of the practical side of it, the pragmatic side of it, of where okay, but what if this results in people committing more murders? What if this trying to do something good, what if it has this unintended effect of making things worse in a way? And so I don't know. It's an interest, I don't know. I'd be curious to know what anyone else thinks, because I don't know. it kind of bothers me that I haven't seen this, like, in anything I've read about this, this proposed change to the law in Florida. I have not seen anyone bring this up. I haven't seen anyone, I haven't seen anyone like question the what might be the unintended effects of making this change. The pros and the cons in that regard, like I said. And I don't know. Something I thought was kind of interesting. I did read that so basically the people who are pushing for this bill, trying to get this done, they're trying, because there's like an existing Supreme, I don't remember what the what the case was. It was like there's a Supreme Court decision that basically said it's unconstitutional to, it was decided that it's unconstitutional to use the death penalty for crimes of this nature, right? For non-homicides. If you don't kill someone, then basically the thinking is that it's not just to then for the state to execute someone. And yeah, and so this bill is kind of, it's trying to like push, it's trying to force the Supreme Court to take another look at that. And now that like the Supreme Court is much more much more conservative, I don't recall when this previous decision was, but obviously the court has changed a lot since then, and so they're trying to, they want to see whether maybe they'd come to a different conclusion about all this. And I don't know. I guess we'll see. I don't know. And it's a difficult thing, I think, because it's like, well, just personally it sounds good, but then you also, if you're you gotta consider these what might be the unintended consequence of changing the law like this. And I think a lot of people don't really think about it. That's one of the, it's one of the most important thing, maybe the most important thing, or of making laws, of considering changes to laws, anything involving the law. It's like, okay, how will this work in real life? Because on the page it says this one thing. How will this actually play out when we start start enforcing it, when we start making people live this way? What will actually happen in reality?